Hey everyone, welcome to Strange Stories, where we explore near-death experiences and supernatural stories from people who've had a glimpse of the other side. If you enjoy our content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. Without further ado, let's get to the story of the day. I had a hard weekend because of COVID-19. I went to the ER on a Thursday evening, almost a week after my symptoms began, and spent the weekend sleeping and feeling quite weak. I watched a lot of television but don't recall much of it. We decided to call my mother and have her watch our 4 children on Sunday evening, all under 6. She agreed to come over on Monday. I washed and dressed on Monday morning, but I was exhausted. I walked down the stairs and inquired about the arrival of my mother. She claimed to have just left Sandy about 25 minutes away. I weighed this against my ability to breathe and gently requested that she call an ambulance before I passed out, which I did. I was conscious enough to welcome the ambulance as they put me into the truck. I recall some of the ride as well, but not much. According to my wife, they had to rip my clothing off and start inserting tubing down into my lungs right away. My unconscious body struggled with this, and I forcefully heaved. They then put me to sleep with something. I believe the combination of the medications utilized, as well as my body's negative reaction to and misunderstanding of the breathing tube, caused my mind to spiral downward. In reality, I had a number of hallucinations while in the hospital. They were threatening to kill me, I was told. I'm a religious man, but my mentality had become so negative that I couldn't bring myself to pray or even think about it. My mind was fogged up with confusion, dread, and rage. I was confused for approximately a week, but it felt like I'd been in the hospital for 3 months. Back at home, my wife was encouraging and happy. She had begged for me to have the comfort of my children, who had died from the same genetic defect in 2007 and 2016. I was afraid that any such event would send me running back to the 2 children I'd missed so much. I had 4 beautiful children, all under the age of 6, waiting at home. Apparently, they didn't have that much faith in my ability to meet my commitments. In the midst of several hallucinations, all of which were bad and occurred within the hospital and my hospital room, I can't emphasize how terrible my mind had gotten enough. To spare myself from the torment of those hallucinations who wished to murder me, I needed a way to commit suicide. My body was running out of energy, but I was in a state of complete terror. I must have pressed the nurse call button 1,000 times, but when they came into my room a few times, they ignored my panicked expression. They had believed I was aware of the big tube in my mouth. The tube, to me, was something that was preventing me from breathing. I had no idea that the tube was breathing for me. I wanted to die once I realized the nurses didn't care, but I held out hope and kept breathing. My body eventually gave up and I breathed my last breath. Of course, the machine was still breathing for me, but this particular breath had me completely exhausted. I imagined that I had worked hard and that I would be okay if I just let myself die. I was irritated that I hadn't died yet. I was still sitting in the hospital room, watching TV. I had no visits during my entire hospital stay, and no one to encourage me to relax or that everything will be fine. My mind was in a really negative and foolish state. I wanted to create essays about the Transformers sequences. To put it another way, I was in big trouble. But then I found myself somewhere else than my hospital room. I was in a building that looked like a subway, with no corners or edges, but plenty of gaps. There was light, yet there were no light bulbs. The environment smelled clean and floral, but there were no flowers nearby. I assumed I was utilizing a virtual reality phone program because I knew I couldn't truly move from my hospital bed. Of course, no such technology exists, but it was my only explanation. I was aware that I was confined to a hospital bed. I couldn't wait for my wife to open her app and come here to talk about my dreadful 3 months. I became aware of the presence of a woman and a man as I waited. Not a married pair, but a group of 30-somethings that had been a large and close part of our life. This was communicated to me without the use of words. A woman approached, while the male remained silent. I knew he was nearby, but I didn't feel compelled to pursue him. I was overcome by these people's love. I could feel it powerfully, and something about them really spoke to my heart. For a brief period, still believing this was an application, I considered asking them their names. However, I recognized them, and they seemed so familiar that I felt it would be awkward, if not embarrassing, to approach them. Nobody needed to tell me they loved me because I already knew. Without words, it was stated to me that my small family had become their life's work, and I felt terrible. Didn't they have families to think about? I left this location unknowingly, having never seen an app, but yet presuming that this was an application. I was back at the hospital, performing my usual feeble-minded antics. Everything was bad and there was no hope. I envisaged inflicting a concussion on myself in the hopes of dying once the needles and chemicals could no longer sustain my non-breathing body. In an attempt to flee, I moved about forcefully, causing deep tissue wounds on my face. But then I returned. The difference between tranquility and worry was dramatic, but not as dramatic as the difference between the love I felt in this new environment and any other feeling I had felt in my 40 years. Something was different about the affection I felt here. The beauty, light, and smell of the place are indelible in my memories, but nothing compares to the sensation of love in this spot. This woman greeted me once more. The man was nearby once more. The emotion was there once more. I went about softly, appreciating this woman's attractiveness without knowing it. I was curious as to why she had decided to care for our family and our children for so long. We grinned and took in the scenery. A panoramic outside view that stretched for miles. We were on an island in the sky, but the limits of the land were obscured by a dazzling haze. The woman finally sat me down. She spoke gently and urged that I be calm. She assured me that I would be well and that we would be reunited. While I found it odd that she'd lumped herself in with the family, her remarks were taken as true. I knew in my heart and head. I'm not sure why there was no uncertainty from that moment on, but I knew I'd be fine. I quickly returned to my hospital room, relaxed. I stopped battling the attachments because I knew I was going to be fine. They withdrew the ventilator and fitted me with an oxygen mask over the next few days. As I rested for a few days, I reflected on that woman. I knew she cared about us, but I couldn't remember if she was a neighbor, a cousin, or an old acquaintance of my wife's. I was concerned about her living circumstances. Why wouldn't we have a home for her in the basement if she loved us so much? Something to save her if she was renting elsewhere. There was such a profound but fitting love between us that it felt improper to have her any place but home. So why couldn't I call her name or where she was living? Finally, after some time had passed, I realized I didn't know this woman. As I came to terms with how phony my hallucinations were, I figured this was also a figment of my imagination. I fell into deep depression. For the next week, I had no relatives or friends, and I struggled to move. I had incontinence issues. I coughed up many liters of bloody mucus. I felt terrible for myself as I glanced out onto the hospital room's roof toward the mountains. I was sorry that I had almost died, yet had nothing to show for it. I had a close buddy who had died, as well as 2 children. I struggled since I couldn't see my friend or my babies. Baby number 1 died at 16 months in 2007, and baby number 2 died at 8 years old in 2016. However, there were significant disparities. My hallucinations were mostly negative and revolved on me being bound to a hospital bed or chair. The persons in my hallucinations were either real nurses or someone I'd seen before, such as the 2 hallucinated nurses who resembled NFL player Richard Sherman. The difference in this lone bright spot was the love. When I think about it, I can still feel the affection. I can smell the smell, which I've never done in a dream before. But For the most part, I can see and remember this woman's face. In fact, I can't get her off my mind. There was familial affection and great concern, yet the image in my mind is of someone with a strong family resemblance, which I never observed while speaking with her. It's never been proven to me that I spoke with my deceased and disfigured infant daughter, now a 30-something-year-old perfect woman, but I believe I did, and I believe she saved my life. I received the impression that she had been there all along, assisting my family in ways that I simply could not comprehend. I recall that man, the one I didn't bother about. I knew I'd see him the next time I came to visit. Of course, I assumed I could come whenever I pleased. There has to be a reason why I sensed his presence and felt his love, yet couldn't see his face. I'm not sure what the cause was, but I believe I recognized him. He was 8 years old when he died. I'm not certain I died. All I know is that physicians continually prepared my wife for my death. But I was definitely on the verge of death, and I had a strong sensation of the love beyond the curtain.